Guru campus, and Dr. Manish, his area of interest is around teaching, learning, and critical pedagogy, cutting across disciplines of history, politics, sociology, education in colonial and post-colonial India. And he has vast experience of having engaged with students and policy matters related to education in India, and from teaching in secondary, higher secondary schools, in schools, students in schools, to working in NGOs and research institutes like CSDS. And then he also has 7 years of teaching in TIS, Mumbai, and where he taught graduate students on pedagogy of social studies, policy practices and governance. And he has also been part of several textbook and syllabus development committees, say for NCRT, SCRT, and National Council for Teacher Education. And he has published extensively around the subject. And some of his very important publications, I will just read out. He has co-edited Education, Teaching, and Learning, Discourse, Cultures, and Conversations in 2023, which came out from Orient Platform. And then co-edited School Education in India, Market, State, and Quality from Rutgers 2018, and contributed to the Handbook of Education Systems in South Asia by Springer, and Curriculum Studies in India, Federated Curriculum, and Handbook of Asian Education, Rutgers. And as far as his scholarship and acknowledgement is concerned, he has been awarded research fellowships by Tuskegee Canadian Institute, Center for the Study of Developing Societies, CSDS, and Jerk Eckert Institute, Institute for International Textbook Research, Germany, and German Historical Institute, London. And he has also been a visiting professor at University of Bayreuth and Ludwigsburg, University of Education in Germany. He has been a member, as already mentioned, of a number of committees which goes around the syllabus and all. So, and today's topic on which Dr. Manish is going to speak on is textbooks as colonial archive, constructions and contestations and colonial citizen, which is very relevant not only from historical studies point of view, but also for understanding the plurality of ideological underpinnings. So without much delay, I'll hand over the mic to you, Manish.
I'm grateful to History Society, and I'm grateful to all of you who have made time to attend. My regards to my seniors, Professor Khan and Sitanwal, who have also joined. It's generally, we people from education are not seen as having any discipline. So we may like to study different disciplines, but generally those disciplines with hello status have less interest in education, and especially when I'm among historians. I have said this to both Professor Danwal and Yogesh. I feel that is somebody having a fake identity. So please help me understand when whatever questions you have. I don't have a pedigree in history, but for long I have dabbled in histories of education and disciplines in particular. This work has drawn on my PhD, but also, as I was sharing with you, subsequent work. And today then what I am going to present on is I'm not a PPT person. I'm an old school teacher mode. So one has used a lot of archives. Okay? But if at all we wish to focus on textbooks, then can textbooks be also read as an archive? And how does one read a textbook to understand certain historical phenomena would be the focus of study today. And I'll take a case study of the first textbook of civics in colonial India, which was published first time in 1897, and it had subsequently several editions, The Citizen of India, by Sir William Lee Warner. And I'll focus not only the text of the textbook, but also its origins and the controversy which happened in different parts of India. So the question for us today is that why the focus will be how do we think about textbooks historically, how we use textbooks to understand certain phenomena historically, how even the history of disciplines is itself to be understood, because you have, say for example, Dipesh Chakravarti, history of history, or this other person, Vinay. So if at all we have to think about the origin of disciplines in some other context, and when they reach a different socio-political, geographical terrain, which is different from the moment of origin, then what kinds of changes also happen within a school subject or a discipline. And I am using them in three senses, the word subject. One is in terms of school subject like history, geography, science, but also that new formations of subjecthood by which people begin to think of themselves as X or Y. And also the people who are coming to school, they are also an educated subject. So how that itself creates a certain anxiety among the colonizers, but they themselves look at themselves as a new political subject. So that's will be the focus of this study. I'll take now about 40 minutes from here. With modernity, there has been a proliferation and reorganization of knowledge in different disciplines. These different disciplines serve not only needs of industrial capitalism and the modern state, but also present certain notions about aesthetic and cultural sensibilities of the modern need. Transference of a knowledge discipline to the school arena involves more than recognition of its importance for educating the young. So when we are going to discuss about a school subject, we need to recognize not only that what are the imperatives, what are the functions associated with it, but also the social forces which are bringing a school subject, which are bringing a subject into the school domain. Okay? At a particular juncture, subjects enter school curriculum. They may also disappear, they may also get renamed. Their purposes may also get changed. So what I am requesting is that since you are students of history, we all are engaging in a historical understanding, that even when we look at the terms like textbook, like classroom, like curriculum, or the purposes of a subject, let's be attentive to the time frame, the discourses, the social forces. Okay. So a lot of work has happened around a series of disciplines, from anthropology to history to English to geography to mathematics, English studies by Gauri Vishwanathan, which are pointing out that how the origin of several disciplines is through an interface, interaction, or an encounter with colonialism. So how those kinds of frames, encounters, perspectives have shaped the disciplines has been undertaken. But there hadn't been any study of civics in particular with reference to colonialism. This is what my work addresses. Then further I am saying that you all are familiar that how colonialism used both ideas of difference and assimilation and thought of colonialism bringing certain civilizational benefits and transformations in the self of the colonized. So they thought that we are bringing the exact knowledge, scientific knowledge to these colonies, and we will reform the native as a person, the native as a society, and their knowledge systems as well to transform. So transformation was a kind of civilizational justification of the subject. But before we come to this, I would like to draw your attention to this even question of textbook for few minutes. When we think of textbooks, what is a textbook? A textbook is an authorized text. Okay? It is representing a legitimate knowledge. It is representing a selection of knowledge from the vast universe of knowledge. That means it represents a certain perspective. Okay? So that the question comes, from whose perspective this knowledge has been brought before us. When we are asking this question of whose perspective, then this is not simply a process of direct dominance being directly translated. Rather, there are a series of dynamic processes, contestations, negotiations, compromises through which a textbook gets written. Okay? So it's not only the selection of knowledge, but also it is also contestations about a certain perspective about knowledge, certain perspective about pedagogy, certain perspective about the learner, about the teacher, about the purposes. Purposes not only related to the subject, but also a conception of the nation, the educated citizen, the transformation that we wish to see. This is something which we are seeing in the context of NET 2020 and the subsequent NCFSC. Also the deletions which happened in textbooks earlier. So often the question which has been posed for textbooks during colonial period in Mangan's work is that, are these textbooks representing imperialist ideology and socialization? Now what I am saying is that is definitely important, but we need to understand that textbooks also have two different sets of addressing. One is the colonizer, who is through the textbook addressing. So they are not only addressing the students, the audience, the readers, but they are also addressing themselves. Okay? So there are two groups of people. One who is addressing the self, the authors, the powers, the state, and those who are being addressed. Now often we tend to imagine that those who are being addressed are also a symbol. And in a lot of nationalist historiography constantly conceptualize the colonizer and the colonized as two singular homogeneous groups. But subsequent historical work has shown that there have been differences, there have been transitions, there have been shifts within the colonizer even at one particular moment. And among the colonized also there have been relations of dominance and subordination. There have been also contestations around locations and interests. So when we pick this textbook, this is an analysis of one particular textbook. But since my own work is a comparative analysis of the idea of citizens since 1890s to early 2000s, both in India and Canada. So if you are interested during the question answer section, I can pick up examples how there are contestations and shifts in both geographies but also across historical periods. So let's begin with how does this then textbook comes into being. In comparison to history or geography which had appeared in Indian school as well as in British schools, in English schools, I will not use the word British schools, by 1820s and 30s, actually history appears in India in 1820s and 30s. In case of English studies also, many times the entry is earlier here and then in England. So it's not always that we are following England. Civics is a late entrant. In America, it has entered by 1870s. In France also, this process has happened. But if you are looking at England or British colonies, say for example India and Canada, the period is 1890s, and in India 1870s is the period when there is discussion that should we introduce a moral textbook which will tell people about duties. And there are several anxieties. Justice, I constantly keep forgetting names. Justice from P is his name. He is quite known as a scholar of Sanskrit also and Jewish students. Justice Telem. Okay. So he objected that we should not bring these moral textbook because there can be it can be used politically. There were anxieties about language. There were anxieties that if we only keep in abstract, then how do we connect it to actual life? So all such questions were there. And by 1890s, now let's remember 1870s and 1890s are also the period of, in England also radical mobilizations are at work. And in India also, which we'll see by 1885, not only Congress gets formed, but before that several educated associations, several newspapers begin to get published, which also begin to critique colonial Raj. Okay. So there are anxieties that how do we maintain a liberal state and how do we train the young in ideology of the state whereby they begin to appreciate their own responsibilities but also see what does the state do for us. So it's at that historical juncture when England is also feeling that we are lagging behind Germany, that you have interest in public perceptions and about state, about law, about national efficiency, that this subject makes an appearance. I have already referred to about anxieties in India from 1880s onwards. But also if you look at the earlier discourse, when the colonized were seen as people who do not change, they have Asiatic mind, who is emotionalist nature, who is not willing to undergo change. So the society, civilization and people, they all are static, their knowledge is obscurantist. And at that time the concern about disloyalty also emerges. And John Murdoch, who was a very well-known missionary and an apologist of the Raj, is arguing that self-concealed rudeness, disloyalty, skepticism, immorality is increasing among Indians due to English education. So the question that is being asked is that we had thought that through introduction of English education we will achieve certain A, B, C goals. But are we actually encouraging disaffection against the Raj? So at this movement, and one can historically also think about periods from 1890s to now, that should the respect for authority be inculcated? That how and what the state does for us, should we not be indebted to them? And how do we teach them? So for the young, then school textbook can be a good way to teach about it, to teach them the value of loyalty. And it's at that time then we begin to look at this textbook. Sir, William Lee Warner, I'll come to his biographical description as well. But this idea emerges in 1870s, gets shelved. But by 1890s, as I just mentioned, that loyalty has a new premium. Its share value has increased. And Sir William Lee Warner is in correspondence with Government of India. And he is saying that I'll write a political tract, it will not be a moral education. And through that he wants a certain kind of surety that if I write the book, it will be prescribed. Okay. Now please understand this for a moment, because during the British period, no textbooks were published by the state. They were published in different languages by the private publishers. So whenever private publishers are publishing, but from them a certain list was selected by the Directorate of Education or Director of Public Instruction, which will say that the book by Dangwal and Dangwal will be used along with Snehi and along with Dharitri and along with Kumar and along with Agarwal. So from these 5 textbooks you pick textbooks. Now Jain's book has not been selected. So it is also financial loss to me and to the publisher. So a lot of things also went in getting the textbooks prescribed, because then these textbooks will be purchased by students. These will be used for class 10, at that time it was metric entrance or prizes. These books may also be translated, and we'll also look at politics of translation briefly. So he is interested that he should get an surety. And what is interesting is that actually probably the person who wrote 1892 to 97 or 1907 to 1897 to 1902 quinquennial review of education, it's probably Orange, he was probably being given the contract, and he is a late entrant, and he is able to remove him from this competition and get an surety. Now what is interesting is that this textbook is originally written in English, but I can confirm at least in these languages it was translated: Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, Gujarati, Canarese, Arabic and Burmese. I have read the Hindi version as well. I'll come to that briefly when we go. But who is Sir William E. Warner? Very interesting character. Those of you who work on princely states, still people look at, he is known as an established authority on princely states. So his tracts continue to get used. He was an ICS officer, and he also occupied several significant positions in Bombay Presidency in the political, juridical and educational departments. He was member of the 1882 Education Commission, Hunter Commission. He acted as the Director of Public Instruction in Maharashtra, in Bombay Presidency, sorry, not Maharashtra. He was also a member of the Council of India and was an influential anti-Congress and anti-Hindu person. He was secretary in the political and secret department of the India office. He was given knighthood in 1911. And what is interesting is that he was in a minority of British officers who supported lower caste and untouchable education, and he was critiqued by Mahadev Govind Ranade and others, Pune Sarvajanik Sabha Press. So for example, when he acted as DPI, there is an excellent paper on sitting outside by Philip Constable on untouchability, touchable education, sitting outside the school veranda, in which I'm just distracting a bit, but you should know the person also a bit. And as I like stories, and Yogesh put me in a comfortable position by saying that we all talk as historians, we like to talk. So one more kissa. So the question is that should the untouchables be allowed to open a school? Because in the common school, if they enter, then the upper castes threaten to withdraw their children, and then school cannot survive. So the earlier British officer, Director of Public Instruction, says that in 1858, Queen Victoria's proclamation, we had said that the British Empire shall not interfere in the religious beliefs of the Indians. So since untouchability is a question of religious beliefs, so we shall not interfere. Now that person goes on leave, and Lee Warner joins as the acting Director of Public Instruction. He says that but British have said that we are going to be fair to our subjects. So fairness demands that everybody should have access to education. And if this means that upper castes will withdraw from schools, then let them withdraw. Why should it matter to us? At the same time, people like even Nehru term him as reactionary. He was disliked, and Nehru has used the term villain for him. So what we'll do is, I'll pick certain extracts to give you a sense, and then how do we interpret. So look at this first extract from the preface. An effort ought to be made to teach our future citizens the ABC of their rights and duties. Who am I and who are my neighbors? How am I governed and what is expected of me? What becomes of the taxes I pay? What is done to keep me and my property safe and to protect me from disease and famine? Now, this is the rationale of civics as a subject. Okay. So, that we will tell you what are your rights and duties. Now, we will look at the ideological contours of this in our next subsequent slide. But Warner, citizen of India, lists several shortcomings of Indians. These are various phrases. For example, we are divided in various sects, caste, religion, language, etc. But the citizens are united. Even when we undertake charity, हम धर्मशाला खोलते हैं तो अग्रवाल धर्मशाला खोलते हैं, हम ब्राह्मण धर्मशाला खोलते हैं. So our charity is also not beyond the specific group. Rather, it should be with reference to the citizens, the wider range of duties and privileges. Then he is saying that we have a duty to the whole country, not only up to family, sect or village. So you are divided. You are in that sense have narrow loyalties. While the empire is an educational experience which is teaching you to become a citizen, widen the arena of your thinking, loyalty, knowledge, sides of action. Okay? And this idea is actually an idea of an unmarked modern liberal citizen who doesn't have any caste, class, gender, race. It is also that you lost independence and there was disorder because you were divided. So this was also coming from the colonizers' discourse, but this is a question which Indians had also began asking. That what was it which led to us being enslaved, right? Similarly, it is also an enunciation of the Raj's responsibility. That we are teaching you responsibility and we are making a people where earlier there were only sects. Okay. So, let's take the second sentence. Indians need to be led by self-interest to go where they like in search of employment and profit, and ought to have the spirit of competition. These could stimulate their labor or induce them to improve their condition. According to Lee Warner, experience had proved that a government is unwise if it makes laws or rules which interfere with the absolute freedom of industry and trade. For every individual knew what sort of labor suits him, it was quite logical that he should be left free to follow his own interest in the choice of work. What was expected of government was to see that employers of labor do not expose their men to danger of life or limb. Government was required to maintain peace and justice, and then capital alone could provide the impulse to labor. Now, how do we understand this and the subsequent text? British had put an end to civil disorders. Now your frontiers are defended. We are guarding your shores. Earlier you had कभी आप पर कोई X attack कर रहा है, कभी Y attack कर रहा है, अब आप safe हैं. Then people should have a good sense and cooperate with the government. They should not protest, because if you protest, then our authorities, our state will not be able to work for you. It will not be able to pay its attention to your development. उनका काम law maintenance, order की maintenance नहीं चले जाएगा. That will be wastage of resources, time, energy, concentration. So, badly governed or savage tribes, these disorderly tribes, distract the attention of the district officer. So, please don't be, rather cooperate the state, the authorities, in enacting and maintaining the order for your own development and growth. Similarly, if you say that police takes bribes or there is miscarriage of justice or some disease has spread, then you alone are responsible because who gave the bribe? It is you who gave the bribe. Why the disease spread? क्योंकि आपने जाके इंजेक्शन नहीं लगवाया, आपने जो आपको नॉर्म्स फॉलो करने चाहिए थे वो नहीं किए, आपने कोर्ट में कुछ झूठ बोला. So it's you who is responsible because you are the one who is tempting the police and officials by giving bribes, etc. So how do we make sense of this? This is the ideology of liberalism, enactment and establishment of civil society. Right? So when liberalism arrives, if we look at Uday Singh Mehta's work, Liberalism and its Empire, or if we look at work of this person who is Lord, who came to AUD and spoke on Gandhi and multiculturalism, Lord Bhikkhu Parekh.
Okay.
So we find in several such writings that how did liberalism provided a justification also for taking away freedom and establishing colonization. But with liberalism, a new set of ethos had to be established in the colonized societies. New sense about property, about law, about your own behavior were to be created. And if you go back, all this idea of self-interest, you being a free labor, which is also in Indian constitution, the idea that competition will stimulate, okay, the idea that labor should be free to move anywhere, and government should operate by laissez-faire kind of thing, and only ensure that workers have their limbs intact. There is no danger to their life because the three natural rights by law are at work. So this is the idea of possessive individualism, as Macpherson has argued, and education is to create a new socialization around the idea of this individual self-interest, reason versus faith and tradition and passions. So instead of passions, be rational, be patient, be ready to undertake change, be open. Okay? And order in the colonial context meant support to the colonial state. So anybody who questioned whether these were peasant rebellions, these were tribal rebellions, whether these are questions by students to any authority of the state, they have continued to be seen. We can see this, that colonial legacy, where any questions are deemed as inappropriate. And improvement is also the rationale and performance of dharma, worshipping the hero, being loyal. And there is also an anxiety around Brahmin, about which I have talked, because a significant number of leaders of these educated associations, from Gokhale to Tilak, were Brahmins. So in particular, the Maharashtrian Brahmins were seen as people who would encourage disloyalty. But the entire discourse is also around a clean citizen and clean state. So state is educational and colonialism is a moral and educational project. I'm rushing a bit, keeping in mind that we should have enough time for discussion. So cleanliness then had two meanings. One is it's a political metaphor, where you should not have dangerous ideas. So sanitizing the Indian body and mind from not having any ideas of protest, disloyalty, questioning, freedom is also creating a clean citizen. But cleanliness was also in response to your spaces. Okay? तो कहाँ आप कूड़ा फेंकें, मूंगफली का छिलका कहाँ फेंकें, पानी आप कैसे इस्तेमाल करें, पार्क को आप कैसे मेंटेन करें, अपनी बॉडी को कैसे मेंटेन करें, उसके लिए कौन से इंजेक्शंस आप लगाएं, मॉडर्न इंस्टीट्यूशंस ऑफ द स्टेट लाइक हॉस्पिटल्स, should you go there or not? Okay. Why should you brush every day? Because if I fall ill, then not only I am a burden to myself, I am also a burden to Dharitri. And I am not able to do my labor, perform my task. So countries' resources and states' resources, because they have to take care of your illness, are also wasted. So when you are thinking about cleanliness, cleanliness is also towards the self, towards the society, towards the state, and also as a pedagogic political metaphor. And colonial state is also a pedagogic and educational enterprise. So a whole paragraph is around that, how the British state teaches you as an educational enterprise. So say for example, railways are running. Now so many of them run and they are hardly late. When there is a traffic inspector on the red light, that person raises the finger and entire traffic stops in London. But what do? We can still ask this question. All these works of PWD department, they tell us that how they organize resources, plan. Similarly, from dark to communication to jails, hospitals, press, all of these are examples how anarchy and lawlessness can be defeated, and how the natives can learn about becoming responsible and learning how to rule. Thereby, they can also become like sensible citizens of London. This is also adult-child relationship, and enlightenment is a way out of immaturity to becoming rational. And we also know that from Darwin to cultural anthropology theories, there were also that fittest of the survival, biological evolutionism had been changed into social, civilizational, racial fittest theory. And through all of this, the question of order, duty, obedience, law was seen as important virtues of the citizen. So if we look at it through the textbook, we can construct this kind of a binary among the British, between the British and the Indians. So British are citizens. This all I have talked about. Britishers have self-control. By we are led by passions. They have integrity. We bribe. We have dishonesty both as citizens and officials. They are responsible. We are irresponsible. We had indifferent rulers जो शतरंज के खिलाड़ी की तरह अपने ही मजे उड़ा रहे हैं, जबकि यहाँ रूलर्स हैं द वाइट मैन्स बर्डन, जो अपना घर छोड़ के हुआ वर्किंग फॉर अस. They are law abiding, they are lawless, they are civilized, they are savage and turbulent, they are knowledgeable, they are ignorant. So all such binaries are at work. I'll just take 5-7 minutes more, that's all, because always the question is that a textbook has been created. So one is that you can do a textual analysis of it in terms of, when I am saying it's also an archive of ideas, contestations, representation. It's in that sense an archive. But also then what happens to the textbook when it reaches the people? This controversy tells us that the responses were not similar across different presidencies. So I'll take up some case studies. For example, in Bengal. Now, what is interesting is that though this is also important to note. Because it's the central government which recommended and wrote a letter to the provincial governments, the presidencies and provinces, that this is a good textbook. You may use it and recommend it in your school as a textbook. But all the provinces don't include it as a textbook. Some use it as a textbook at class 7, like for example in Bombay. But in Bengal, they said we will not use it as a textbook. Rather, we will use it as a library book, okay, or as a prize book. Now, then the question is, so it is also about the federal question, it's also about the autonomy question. And we'll see that when the controversy happens, then what happens. So in Bengal, the syndicate of Calcutta University is the authority which determines what will be selected as a textbook for the matriculation. Now, the DPI, Director of Public Instruction, and their committee recommends the textbook. But this syndicate rejects. Now then, later on the question is asked in the correspondence which I found in London, that they are asking that who are the members of the committee, of the textbook committee which selects. So they said that it has more non-official members. And these are members who also come from law and also come from Calcutta University. They say, okay, they have rejected the textbook. But what if we don't accept their recommendation? So then the answer is that they will resign from the committee in protest. So then in 1902 in Shimla conference, this person who divided Bengal, Lord Curzon, then under him a special conference gets is organized, and at Shimla then they decide, a textbook policy is decided that from now on, in any textbook committee, the number of official members has to be more than non-official members. So that if at all there is dissent, the government can get what it wants to get. The result of this committee. What happens now in Bombay? In Bombay, young Hindus, the book is seen as very difficult because young Hindus are extraordinarily ignorant of their own country, and then one of the members is writing, Giles was the Director of Public Instruction, that the book contains a great deal of information which can be used, so it will be useful. But the language is very difficult. Children cannot understand the language. So it would be helpful also if not too much emphasis is given on how Britishers are superior to the natives. So two set of objections are already made. One is on language and as a result on comprehension, and second is about colonial superiority and what it may lead to. Now let's go to the third one, which is the most interesting case of northwest provinces in Awadh and Allahabad University. It's only after a grant when I was already teaching at this that I found this in Allahabad University. Now, education department says that okay, we recognize that rights of citizens as compared with rights are acknowledged in the previous period. Nothing is being said about it. What were the rights of the people before? And that the duty of citizen, which was being argued, has not been given. The textbook should be more of moral. It is more of a political, which can lead to a controversy, which will actually lead the teachers and the politically inclined students also to use it as a track to express their political opinion. And then they say that the subtle-minded Hindu boys who have far more pronounced cynical views than English boys. Be clear. There, so far we were saying that the British and Hindu mind is an ignorant mind. Here they are saying that the Hindu boys are far more critical and get the subtlety. Then they are saying that it is against the pedagogic theory because the kinds of experiences you are using, they are not the experiences of the students. Remember, this is 1900s. आज से 125 साल पहले ये सवाल उठाया जा रहा है कि जिस हिसाब से पाठ्य पुस्तक लिखी जा रही है उसमें किस तरह की भाषा का इस्तेमाल हो, क्या उसे एक आम विद्यार्थी समझ सकेगी, उसमें किस प्रकार के अनुभवों की जगह हो, क्या वे अनुभव एक ऐसी स्थिति से आते हैं जिनका विद्यार्थी के जीवन से कोई तारतम्य नहीं है, कोई लेना देना नहीं। तो उस स्थिति में टेक्स्ट बुक, what purpose would it serve? It's also about the ideology of the textbook. It's also about representation of the textbook. And they are saying that already there are so many subjects. If you add one more subject, then children will be burdened even more. Then they are also saying, let this textbook be rewritten by someone who understands how the Indian school students are, and they also have a sense that when these children come to school at this level, say class 8 or class 9 level, then what is their level at which things should be pitched. It's also around that you have a question. Then it's also saying that there was heavy use of guidebooks. Always whenever you are looking through English this, whatever they are saying, a guidebook, and this happened with us also when we tried creative things in textbooks at Delhi or NCERT 2005. Guidebooks are there. They are also saying that it's difficult to finish the course in the given time, and Indian school boys are too immature and mentally underdeveloped to take up. So you have two kinds of messaging going on. Now I found 72 remarks by students on this textbook alone. These can be classified in 6 broad bases. One, they are saying that you are saying that these things you will do, but these things you are not doing. So they are claiming the colonial promises. They are questioning the colonial promises. Then they are saying that Indians did not achieve this. This is wrong, because the students themselves are giving examples from India's past and history. Then they are saying that if you say that these are our failures, no, these are failures of the colonial state because the way it operates. Then the claims that Britishers have done so good for Indians is actually false or exaggerated or misleading. They point out the ill effects, they demand greater representation. So the question is that who represents, who speaks, and allow Indian tradition. So finally, what I am saying, just one thing I'll say besides this slide. Incidentally, I don't have that whole textbook. In Kolkata, I was able to find the Hindi version of this textbook. No name of the author, the translator is given. But in the English one, there were a lot of poems by Wordsworth and Tennyson. जब ये हिंदी किताब में आता है तो इनका तुलसीदास की रामायण की चौपाई के अंदाज में चीजें लिखी जाती हैं. तो एक तो क्वेश्चन है फॉर्म, दूसरा क्वेश्चन है मैसेजिंग. In the preface itself, it is mentioned that we need to rescue Hindi because the Hindi-Urdu divide from 1870s onwards in northern India had sharpened, and the new Hindi textbooks, the books which prepared teachers for schools, they themselves were sites of attention of Hindi magazine Saraswati, of others on which Krishna Kumar and others have written. So the textbooks themselves were sites of preparation of new publics of Hindi and as Hindu, and Urdu being confined and limited to Muslims. So those battlegrounds also enter when a textbook gets translated. So what we are seeing is that the colonial textbooks also participated in translation in the native politics identity formation. There was an agency of the colonized, even if we don't always find it. There were contestations. Colonial education officials and textbooks need to be read far more for more than colonial dominance. Like we have picked questions of pedagogy, language comprehension, suitable age, identities, guidebooks, kunjis. We also need to see that how the discourse of citizenship is always overlapping with discourses of morality. So how moral and political combined together is something which we find even after independence and in contemporary period as well. And one more thing is that this whole idea that state is a benefactor of the masses and masses should remain loyal and grateful to the state. And if at all there is a failure, it is in the masses, not in the state. this colonial premise of the state, the justification and masking of the colonial state which since I am a historian of civics as a subject, which continued even after independence, and how it plays out in contemporary days would be worth thinking about at a time when we are increasingly speaking about decolonization, but colonial frames continue to frame our perspective and lens to different things. Thank you very much. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Manish. That was interesting kind of a take on colonial education ideology behind the colonial education system. And I'll just briefly give my few comments as I have observed and also try to make sense of it, not in a very colonial kind of a context, but since I come from Japanese studies background, I was trying to draw certain parallels, like because we are looking at this colonial ideology and education-related ideology in a very colonial kind of context, but I was taken to a space which was not colonial in that sense, right? So Japan obviously was not colonized, and the time.
But Japan was colonized.
It was. So I am looking at the time during which all these developments were taking place, which is 1870s, which is also exactly when the similar experiences were happening. But while your presentations was very much around creating a civic citizen, so there in Japan, I was trying to understand, like, how is it different? Because it was both obviously civic as well as national citizen. So this is something maybe you can give little sort of like, what do you call it? Your own take on it, like, when we talk about it in this kind of context, colonial and non-colonial kind of a situation, because the ideas are very similar in that sense. So whatever narratives that the state was creating, and particularly that end objective was control, end objective was regulation, and propagating the state, propagation of the state. And it is, but in a very colonial kind of a context, where you have these two kinds of people who belong to two completely different kinds of category, racially and otherwise. But here I'm trying to understand it in a Japanese context where they're the same people. So where the exactly similar path is almost like being adopted. Of course, it is also happening under the influence of Western, modernity kind of idea about it. And so I think there's a lot of possibility, historical possibility of doing comparative kind of analysis when you are looking at this kind of, pedagogy, teaching, learning. What does it mean for the state? What does it mean for the people? And in different kind of a state context. So this is one thing I thought was very, useful for me to listen to. Yeah. So one thing that I had in mind when listening to you was, you said the imagination of a liberal state, for instance, like the state was imagining a liberal kind of a space. So if you could just maybe enlighten a bit on what was the character that imagined of a liberal state in a colonial kind of a state. So what does it mean? Like, what does liberalism or liberal even hold any meaning in a colonial kind of a conditioning sort of? So that was one thing I had to ask. And if you could answer, or you could take more questions, whichever way you would like to.
Whatever, I'm fine. If there are more questions.
Are there more questions? You want to, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Manish, I am asking a bit provocative question.
Yes, please.
First, let me accept that textbooks are very, very important, second, in shaping the minds of children. In the 1960s, 70s, we had a certain kind of textbooks, history as well as in other disciplines. We know the kind of society which produced at the end of the century. We are living that. So I'm just thinking that how much textbook really are able to shape the mind of the people. I'm just questioning, and I will just from you that how much weightage this would be to this. Similarly, I'm just giving you one quote from Narzary book, Agrarian Conquest. He said that they did a great thing, British did a great thing in Punjab. They expected appreciation of the task they performed there. And Narzary at the end of that again says, I'm forgetting the officers, Lawrence Juvira. He goes again there in a horse ride as he goes in the beginning of the rule in Punjab. And he was very disappointed of the response of the population of Punjab, who had a lot of complaint to the British rather than accepting gratitude that they have done something for the Punjab. Again, the similar kind of things. Intentions are different. The results are quite correlated to the intentions. So, I would like your response on this.
May you respond to these two
Yes.
questions?
Yes.
Okay. Dharitri, what you are actually proposing is that if we undertake a comparisons of textbooks from 1880s or 90s onwards in India and Japan, then maybe we should either do it ourselves if you know Japanese and we search for these textbooks,
Great.
or we apply for a research project. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is on a serious note, not on a lighter note. But now what I'll do is I'll draw the these. So actually I'll start with, you have actually two questions. I'll start with your first question, that do textbooks make any difference? Why should we worry about textbooks? Okay. And then I'll come to historical comparisons and these things. If we say that textbooks do not make any difference, or if we say that textbooks are the only thing which make a difference, I think we are erring on both the sides. Okay. Why am I saying so? I'll start with the second one, that they make difference. So education is one of the things, a social phenomena, institutional. When we think of education, we are referring to two things. Okay. Education is a system, is different from education as an idea. Today we all are sitting within a system where we are bound by certain regulations of the university, which is part of UGC and Delhi state versus the national state. So there is a certain systems within which education as a system gives us certain credentials. There are certain things we read. Okay. And education as an idea, we think in terms of what it should be and what should be its purposes. And we also, as my teacher Professor Krishna Kumar says, we also experience education at particular historical junctures. Being in AUD in 2024 and 25 is not the same being in AUD in 2009. In terms of its development, in terms of the wider societal ecology, in terms of the disciplines and people, in terms of campuses, in terms of how things are responded to. So at what moment we enter an institution is also different, number one. So system and idea is different. Second, when we are thinking about education, education is neither a dependent variable, nor it is existing outside the social, historical, economic and cultural forces and institutions. It is contributing to shaping those processes, but is also significantly affected by them. So this is a thing because I was a member of 2005 onwards National Curriculum Framework textbook committees, right? These were the textbooks which till recently were used. But these were secular textbooks. We promoted critical pedagogy. Our textbooks asked a lot of questions. But a lot of people who would have read those textbooks would have voted for Prime Minister Modi in 2014 and 19. Okay. We are seeing the increasing legitimization of violence. So then the question which sir is asking is, do textbooks make a difference? Should we at all worry about? I think what we are disregarding here is that these are also results of larger political mobilizations. The forces at work, the media and WhatsApp. So vis-a-vis this, what a textbook does also has limited scope, number one. Number two, the textbook is not only a text, but it also acquires a certain meaning within a certain institutional context and with reference to pedagogy. So if secular textbooks, or for that matter communal textbooks, also continue to be taught only in a kunji fashion, where there are no possibilities of engagement with the idea and differences, then whether these textbooks are X or Y, the messages will not significantly affect. Then if this is so, that then the question is, should we be worried about textbooks? My answer is not because I'm work with textbooks or usse maine roti kamai hai. Textbooks are significant because textbooks are also a source of knowledge. Textbooks are significant because what is the purpose of education, that is also codified in the textbook. What is a discipline? What is history? What is geography? What is chemistry? Our own imagination of the discipline, if we look at textbooks across periods, across generations and across different countries, would also show that it is different. So textbooks in that sense, that for example the post 2005 textbooks posed a series of questions to students. They invited students to think about their experiences. The history textbooks, of which Dharitri himself was the chair, brought in historical resources, historical sources, and asked students to interpret them. That how does a historian think? How do we compare sources and make judgments? How do we understand that what is the background of this source to understand what is written in this source? This is what you do as historians. It also introduced students to that. Similarly, in sciences, an important experiment, Hoshangabad science teaching experiment, which emerged from, which drew inspiration from England, also happened and subsequently in NCR. So how do we think about this is important. Then textbooks are also what ideas and identities they are propagating. So when I read, am I there? If I am there, I am in what way there? Who is speaking about me? Is my life, experiences, aspirations, language also there? But some other may be also there. That means a textbook should provide for a variety of this. Hence, textbooks become significant because in a democratic society, if we wish to develop our young in democratic dialogue, in listening to diverse ideas based on also evidences and experiences, listening to difference from us, then textbook and pedagogic experience are also a site for preparation of it. Hence, textbooks are important. Okay. But most of the time, we have textbooks even written which continue to be used by IAS aspirants, by Romila Thapar and others. बच्चों को समझ भी नहीं आती थी। मैंने 10 साल पढ़ाई, कई बार अंग्रेजी के शब्द ऐसे होते थे मैं डिक्शनरी खोल के देखता था। तो आप विद्यार्थी को इतना संक्षेप में चीज कह दे रहे हैं कि मुझे सारा ज्ञान आज ही पेल देना है, राइट। तो भाई साहब हम अब वैसी स्थिति में आप साइकोलॉजिकली समझिए कि मनीष जैन आपको पढ़ा रहे हैं, आपको कुछ पल्ले नहीं पढ़ा रहे हैं, 75% अटेंडेंस के लिए क्लास को अटेंड करनी है, क्या कीजिएगा? बैठ के आप सपने लीजिएगा, आप टास्क सोचिएगा, आप झपकाइएगा और जब आपको होश आएगा आंख बंद करके तो आप दिखाइएगा कि मैं तो सुन रहा था बहुत ध्यान से मनीष जैन तुम्हारी बात। आप ड्राइंग और फूल पत्ती बनाइएगा, करते हैं, ये सब रेजिस्टेंसेस है ना हमारे। These are also ways of coping up mechanisms, right? So that's in that sense. Now we come to two other questions which Dharitri is posing. These are also significant questions, so I'll draw three parallels. मैं देखिए पुराना स्कूल टीचर हूँ, अब भले ही 15 साल से यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ा रहा हूँ, लेकिन मेरी जड़ें जो हैं मैं बार बार कहता हूँ स्कूल अध्यापक में है। तो स्कूल अध्यापक तब 35 मिनट से पहले ही नहीं रुकता था, अब 2 घंटे से पहले ही नहीं रुकता है। तो मेरे जवाब जो हैं वो 1 नंबर वाले नहीं होते हैं। हम लोग उस समय, सर ने भी यही किया होगा मेरे ख्याल से, जो हम लोगों की उम्र है, धारित्री और योगेश ने भी, हमको 5 सवाल आते थे, 3 और 5 नंबर के सवाल नहीं आते। 20-20 नंबर के BA में, MA में हमें 5 या 3 सवाल लिखने होते थे। रट के जाइए, कोई 5 या गेस मार के जाइए, कुंजी और चैंपियन से लगा के और दीजिए, ठीक है। तो थोड़ा सा जवाब अगर लंबा हो तो अब आप आ गए हैं तो भुगत लीजिए, मुझे वैसे भी हिस्ट्री के लोग मौका मिलता नहीं है उनको झिलाने का। तो हिंदी अंग्रेज़ी चल जाएगी, भले इंग्लिश मीडियम यूनिवर्सिटी है। तो सवाल अब जो है हमारा, हम 3 अलग अलग वक्त लेते हैं। 1 is Canada, okay, 1 is India, about which I have already talked about, and the 3rd is the period from Japan. Now there are 3 sets of questions which are emerging from her this. One is that what is liberalism, and when liberal ideas enter different social spaces and time, then do they also have different resonances and messages? Now here I have already briefly referred that how the liberal ideas had 2-3 functions. One, that liberalism as an ideology denoted Western modernity, okay, at that historical period, and thereby it represented claims of enlightenment, claims of modernity, claims of civilizing the uncivilized. So then the question is that मैंने चीज तो बहुत बढ़िया बनाई, but do you have the necessary preparation to accept it? तो मैं दिल्ली में, मुझे खाने के एग्जाम्पल हमेशा होते हैं, अभी तक मैंने नहीं दिया था एक भी, तो अब पहला एग्जाम्पल कि मैं स्ट्रॉबेरी दिल्ली में उगाना चाहता हूँ। स्ट्रॉबेरी पसंद है भाई साहब आपको खाने में? पसंद है? नहीं है पसंद? तो स्ट्रॉबेरी हम दिल्ली में उगाना चाहते हैं। स्ट्रॉबेरी आइडिया तो बहुत अच्छा है, लिबरलिज्म है, लेकिन क्या दिल्ली में उग सकता है? तो आप फिर वहां ये सवाल करते हैं कि दिल्ली में क्या स्थितियां पैदा करनी पड़ेंगी जिसके बाद स्ट्रॉबेरी उग सकेगा। तो एक तो दिल्ली और शिमला का डिफरेंस है जहां स्ट्रॉबेरी पैदा होगा। दूसरा है वो स्थितियां निर्माण करने का जस्टिफिकेशन भी लिबरलिज्म से आ रहा है। The creation of civil society, the creation of new norms about property, to civil society, to public sphere, to interaction, to think about wider loyalties, becoming people and citizens. Though we are subjects, but they are also a preparation in citizenship. So that's the second. So thereby liberalism becomes a double occasion, an occasion to establish superiority, and an occasion to a goal to be met, which demands the transformations of the native self, native society, native governance, and native traditions. And if we look at even the liberal ideology, when you are saying that these are the requirements, So Kant is saying that you have to be rational. But if you are not rational, then the similar kinds of benefits cannot be given to you. You have to develop from your childhood stage to adolescent stage to become an adult, and only then you can be given the right to vote. मेरा दिमाग खराब है, अब मैं भले ही 55 का हूँ, तो आप मुझे right to vote थोड़ी देंगे, आप तो छीन ही लेंगे ना मुझसे. So that's how it works. Now, if we associate, I'll complicate this a bit further. If we bring this idea in Canada, then what is Canada? It had already become a confederation by 1870s, by the time this textbook is given. So is Canada a colonial society? We often classify Canada as a white settler society. When we classify it as a white settler society, then we forget that there are indigenous people beforehand whose colonization before and then until now continues. So colonialism also has multiple meanings, and the association of the white English-speaking population with the mother country England versus those of the another foundational country France is different from those of and the Chinese, Indians, Japanese who are going about the migrant. So there are multiple other processes also at work whereby these differentiations act within the same society in terms of colonization. Like जैसे हम वो कहानी याद करें महाश्वेता देवी की जो it's about an आदिवासी जो दिखता बहुत छोटा है and the entire state processes उसने उसको बौना बना दिया है. तो क्या यहाँ कोई इंटरनल कॉलोनाइजेशन एट वर्क है? ये सवाल उठता है उस कहानी में कि कैसे विकास के जरिए ही आपने विनाश किया है, या जो सवाल एंटी पॉलिटिक्स मशीन में उठता है कि इज एब्सेंस ऑफ डेवलपमेंट ए फेलियर बिकॉज डेवलपमेंट वॉज नॉट फुल्ली परस्यूड? Was it an unintended effect or was it actually an intended effect? That's the success of it. क्या देश में अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट की स्थिति फेलियर को दिखाती है या वो एक्चुअली सक्सेस को दिखाती है पॉलिसीज की? दिस ब्रिंग्स अस टू देन जापान. That when we are thinking about Japan, which is on the one hand undergoing major restoration, and thereby on the one hand it wants to model itself along the West, but it also has its own distinct history. So then how do we, this is a debate actually going on nowadays among several people in comparative education journals, where the question that is it the only Western modernity which is the culprit, and hence everywhere else you leave out कि आज की कंटेम्प्रेरी चाइना को आप कैसे सोचो कि केवल वेस्टर्न मॉडर्निटी को आप दोष दे दें तो जो ऑथोरिटेरियन रेजीम है चाइना का उसका जस्टिफिकेशन बन जाता है क्या थ्रू डीकोलोनाइजेशन और डिस्टेंस? तो आप कैसे समझेंगे इस सवाल को? तो अपनी जो रिलेशनशिप्स हैं, ऑल आर हिस्टोरियंस, वी डिडंट हैव ए सिंगल रिलेशनशिप अक्रॉस डिफरेंट एराज ऑफ कॉलोनियलिज्म विद कॉलोनियलिज्म. डिफरेंट कास्ट ग्रुप्स, डिफरेंट other social groups with reference to gender और gender caste के intersections और class के साथ regions में जो movements चली हैं, these are also not of the same character. They have also led to several kinds of multiplicities. Further, what I was referring to is कि जो colonial frames हैं वो आज़ादी के बाद भी जारी रह सकते हैं, तो उनको समझने की जरूरत होगी. अब जब हम जापान के केस में देखेंगे तो यहाँ हम लिबरलिज्म, कॉलोनियलिज्म और स्टेट, तो एक तो है लॉजिक ऑफ द स्टेट, राइट? लॉजिक ऑफ द स्टेट अक्रॉस एज ए पॉलिटिकल एंटिटी मे बी सिमिलर इन लार्जर सेंस, बट हाउ दैट गेट्स मैसेज, व्हाट फॉर्म्स इट टेक्स थ्रू लॉ एंड अदर इंस्टीट्यूशंस, through its repressive and ideological state apparatus has to be seen. Okay? क्योंकि एजुकेशन और ये जो मामला है ये सिंपल बड़े छक्के का ही नहीं है IPL का. इसमें टेस्ट मैच भी है जिसमें अलग अलग लेवल पे टू सी दिस इज इम्पॉर्टेंट. सो वन वुड से दैट इट्स नॉट इक्विवेलेंट. लेकिन जब जापान कोरिया को या चीन को कॉलोनाइज करता है, तो वहाँ भी सिविलाइजेशनल डिफरेंस और ऑपरेशन आता है. सो इन व्हाट वेज दैट जापानीज कॉलोनियलिज्म इज सिमिलर टू वेस्टर्न कॉलोनियलिज्म, इन व्हाट वेज इट इज डिस्टिंक्ट रिमेन्स देयर. और खुद जापान में जब अमेरिका वाले सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वॉर के बाद प्रोस्टिट्यूशन और सब चीज़ें करते हैं, तो फिर आप उस पीरियड को कैसे देखेंगे? वन वुड नीड टू कॉम्प्लीट.
Anybody would like to?
Yes.
जी,
Thank you, Dr. Manish. I have very basic questions, 2 or 3 basic questions which I prepared. I mean, related to the colonial text. So, are there any available source that discuss the entire content and syllabus, of course, during colonial period? And if we focus colonial text, what was their nature?
नहीं, ये सवाल दोबारा बताइए कि आप ये पूछ रहे हैं कि पूरे कॉलोनियल पीरियड के दौरान
Yes.
जो पढ़ाया जाता
हाँ,
रहा उसका कोई इकट्ठा कहीं सॉरी उसका इकट्ठा हमें कहीं मिलता है.
Exactly. And the one important thing is the entire, I mean, the syllabus and content. It's really talk about with the betterment of the society. It's always think about that the agenda of colonial officers or mindset. And there is no doubt Asiatic societies also talk about some traditional knowledge. So is there any information about traditional Indian knowledge, Sanskrit knowledge or other vernacular language?
colonial
Exactly. आपने अभी एक और अच्छी बात बताई कि जैसे आपने कहा कि स्कूल में आपने पढ़ाया है, तो मेडिकल यूनिवर्सिटी पर अपॉइंटमेंट से पहले मैंने भी स्कूल में पढ़ा है. और जो मैंने गैप देखे गेस्ट फैकल्टी एज अ कॉलेज फिर स्कूल, सो जो अभी की अवेलेबल टेक्स्ट हैं, देयर इज नो
टेक्स्ट क्या यूनिवर्सिटी
स्कूल टेक्स्ट अभी के स्कूल टेक्स्ट.
हाँ.
सो द प्रिजर्व नॉलेज, आई मीन जो स्कूल स्टूडेंट की नॉलेज है वो 8th क्लास 8th में 9th में 10th में 11th और 12th तक आते आते उसमें कहीं पर भी क्रोनोलॉजिकल कनेक्शन नहीं हो रहा है. सो व्हाट इज आई मीन टू द रीजन कि वो क्या ऐसे कारण है, व्हाट इज आई मीन टू द एग्जैक्ट रीजन बिहाइंड.
समझाएंगे आप एब्सेंस ऑफ क्रोनोलॉजी.
Yes, so the class 8th history, it's talk about the Indian modern Indian history. 9th में आते ही वो अचानक से वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री के थीम्स को पढ़ रहे हैं, जिसके अंदर वो हिटलर को पढ़ रहे हैं, जिसके अंदर वो वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री के. देन 10th में आते ही फिर से वो कुछ एक इंडिया का चैप्टर पढ़ रहे हैं जिसमें वो इंडियन नेशनलिज्म पढ़ रहे हैं. फिर अचानक से वो 10th में सिलेबस में आते ही वो यूरोपियन नेशनलिज्म पढ़ रहे हैं. द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग, वो बिना कोई इंफॉर्मेशन के वो डायरेक्ट रशियन रिवोल्यूशन लेनिन को पढ़ रहे हैं. So how we are able to understand, I mean to the manage to the all chronological insight, which is very important part of the understanding of historical knowledge. So the mismatch of the historical chronology is completely school education, and immediately if any student in graduation वो आते ही उसके साथ भी उसका कोई मैच नहीं होता है. तो यहाँ पर यूनिवर्सिटी की कैरिकुलम फ्रेमवर्क बहुत ही अलग है.
दूसरा रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट आपके डिपार्टमेंट को बताना चाहिए. एक्चुअली देयर इज नो सिंगुलर authoritative writing. Ji, there is no. I'll complete.
No, I'm saying if you want to take more questions.
Yeah, if you would like.
If there are more questions.
Any questions from either?
Yes.
जी, अपना नाम जरूर बताएं. विष्णु.
आपने जैसे कहा भी कि टेक्स्ट बुक एक हिस्टोरिकल कॉन्टेक्स्ट में प्रोड्यूस हो रहा है, उसका एक सोशल कॉन्टेक्स्ट है. तो फॉर इंस्टेंस क्योंकि बिकॉज वी आर स्टूडेंट्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री, वी नो थ्रू आउट द हिस्टोरिकल टाइम द आइडिया ऑफ द कॉमन सेंस एज E.P. Thompson rightly is changing, right? So I mean the sacrality that textbook may or may not have in late 19th, early 20th century may have changed, shifted and eroded over time. So if we look at the same text today, the kind of sacrality that it may have, as I pointed out, may have eroded. So because there are other avenues from which you can get the same information. The other thing that I want your opinion on is, for instance, epistemology का जो knowledge of knowledge production has also changed with different kinds of trends. For instance, I'm thinking of Gadamer's Gadamer's contribution, or for that matter, the Foucauldian view on epistemology and knowledge production. How that has, of course, it has remained within the academic circle, but also may have, उसके कुछ
टेक्स्ट बुक्स में उसके क्या
हाँ देखने को मिल सकते हैं, राइट. सो ये सारी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में टेक्स्ट बुक किस तरीके से फिर वो एक मे बी एक काउंटर पब्लिक क्रिएट कर रहा है विद इन द ऑडियंसेस, द वन हू इज रीडिंग दोस टेक्स्ट.
We have one online question. Professor Khan, I think he had raised hand.
And we also think
Yeah, I asked a question, and it was not just a clarification I wanted from Manish, since he has studied this area. There were two aspects. One is, you have given us the details of the debates and all in Calcutta, Allahabad and all about the syndicate and others, taking discussion on that, but how in the final analysis the books were, how privilegedly recommended or not, were they used for a period of time or not at all? I just that is one aspect. Second is, I have always wondered about this, that there were large number of schools which were run by convents or missionary schools, and where the ruling classes, if we can call, of the elite were sending their children at that time. But then they were also being governed by these textbooks, or they were, because their examination and curriculum was generally decided by the institutions in England. And were they also subject to these textbooks, or they were given altogether different curriculum and different textbooks for study, and therefore they will not be affected by whatever is being prescribed through these textbooks, and it was confined to only schools run by the state or the government in different presidencies. Just these two, if you can. Thank you.
One more.
yes, Dhara.
Dhara?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you for this lecture. I was wondering that during this period when the textbooks were being prepared, or there were there were committees to form textbooks, and a lot of efforts were being put in. Like you would have a committee where local people will also be incorporated. But at certain points, I've realized that in Bombay presidency, this kind of encouragement to the writers were also given. Like the writers will be asked to write a textbook. I mean to say, for example, say a novel book, or maybe an essay on history. So the encouragement was also there to the writers or the thinkers of the time to come up with a textbook on a certain subject, which can be introduced as a textbook in the school. So have you come across this kind of instances in other presidencies, and what was the ratio of these literary works to be included as textbook in schools? You can comment on this. Thank you.
Yes, one.
Frankly, thank you for this. Grateful to you, Yogesh, because the questions which historians are asking are pointing to serious gaps. So, in our knowledge of textbooks and processes. When I was in Canada, I'm just giving it as an instance. For my PhD work, because it was a comparative study, I found there both authoritative documents which even librarians and archivists had created, and there was also a book which wrote about different subjects and changes in education, in curriculum, in different periods. And this was way back when I read in 2004, and it inspired me, but so far there is no such book in India, which will even lists that we don't even have lists combined, which will tell us that at what time, which were the textbooks of which subjects and which classes were being recommended in different provinces. Even at provincial level, we don't have any such lists. Okay. You know that as a historian that in the early periods, Britishers were publishing lists of books published, and these lists were sent to England. But here also, these are other books, not necessarily textbooks. Okay. One, even if it is listed, even if the name is there, if we don't know whether which of these was a textbook, unless we look at the DPI document, where the lists were revised almost every year, or even if they are repeated after 2 years, 3 years, they continue. So unless we have that authoritative resources, when I said that this textbook was being used, I was able to say this from multiple sources. A, that I was able to find different versions of the textbook in subsequent years from 1894 onwards, 97, 99, 1900, 1902. So many times the textbooks, because my work goes on from colonial till now, they would say that where this is recommended as a textbook, as per which board or which department or what order. So that's one, though in this case we have clearly mentioned. That's one. So across this we don't know. Hence the ratio thing also we cannot. But in reference to history, one gets certain idea from Veena Naregal's book and Prachi Deshpande's work, because they refer to such controversies. One gets a sense of moral textbooks from Dilip Chavan's work, which is with reference to caste and moral textbooks. Okay. So Dilip Chavan's book is also a very interesting study around this. I found one PhD which was on geography textbooks in Bombay Presidency in Marathi. So that has a list of certain textbooks in Marathi of that. What I also witnessed was that given the bad infrastructural situation of the kind of schools, this is related to the question sir was asking, many times I reached schools, they said कि last year ही एक एल्मीरा थी जिसमें colonial textbooks थी, वो हमारे पास जगह नहीं थी रखने की, so we kept it out और बारिश में वो खराब हो गई. So several such things are there. I'll tell you two other sources where you can, not exactly about the proportion. APU had also invited me and several other people. They were thinking about developing an archive of textbooks which they have. So if you go to APU website, there you can find several such sources. Another excellent museum of textbooks is in Germany. It's where I was a fellow, Otto Benningham fellow. It's Georg Eckert Institute of Textbooks and Media, which has textbooks from all over the world. So I was there twice, but I didn't find any colonial textbooks of India there, though they have textbooks of different states after independence from various subjects. Another source maybe which I was able to find some is Maharashtra archive and UP archive. But if you are concerned only with Marathi, then that will be. And I had also gone to Pune, where there is this state SCRT. But probably I'll also, if I get your email, if you share it with Yogesh, Dharitri or me, I'll also put you in touch with a person, Kishore, who is who works in the context of Marathi things. So in case he knows some sources, that may be useful. Another thing, in case you happen to go to British Library, then they have far more systematic records. But you would need to go through systematically of education department records, which was sometimes in home department, sometimes in political department, and see what are the curriculum and listed, and then they also have list of publications year-wise sent from India. And if you match the two, then that will give you some idea of which are the library books and which are the textbooks. I'll come to Vishnu. Your question is an important question. I think will force me to think significantly about. Sir, I will also need to check whether even convent schools were how many of them were allied to England. My sense is, after studying education for 30 years, that only where the children of the British officers studied, only in that context they followed the England curriculum. I have a paper, incidentally, which was around education of the children of the British officials in India. मुझे ढूंढना पड़ेगा, but we had, because this is the question a student had asked when I was teaching history of education.
Mostly boarding schools have also followed the England.
Yes, but yes. So it's only later on. So these boarding schools followed, but all the convent schools were not always boarding.
Yeah.
Okay. And also the system of grant in aid, which was brought in by Britishers after the Woods Dispatch 1854. So significant number of Christian missionary-run schools were grant in aid schools. But one precondition of all grant in aid schools was that they had to follow the syllabus and the textbooks prescribed by the department. Because only then, if their students wanted to get a scholarship, they wanted to participate in competitions, or they were to be admitted for these class 10 metric, then they had to use those textbooks which were prescribed by the department. So many old granting aid schools, both of Christian missionaries but later on by various other Hindu, Muslim as well as caste groups and language group organizations, they were following, because there was no CBSE at that time, there were different boards which were regional boards. CBSE came into existence only in 1960s. Okay, so we should also keep that in mind when we are looking at that study. Okay. Warner's textbook continued to be used despite these controversies for a significant period, but civics as a subject had very limited presence in these early years. Not all the states, the provinces, included civics as a subject. Many times it overlapped with history, etc. It's only after 1917 when Russian Revolution happens and a lot of Western countries begin to worry that now we need to train our citizens so that they also don't become corrupted, that civics enters significantly in British colonies and Western democracies. Okay. And then in India also, from class 5 onwards, we find inclusion of civics, but it shared timetable sometimes with hygiene, which was also a subject, sometimes with morality, and at other times with history. Even now, if we see political science, or earlier it was called civics, always had 20 marks out of 100. The major portion was history and geography. So it always had limited presence. Now your question is a very significant question. So when you are talking about that, they allow me to also now wear the hat of an education person for a minute. I was trying to fake myself a princely imposter, not rather a ordinary imposter as a historian. When you began to talk about education, you used the word information. There is difference between information and knowledge. Information is something which others give. knowledge, information becomes knowledge when I learn what to do with it and I engage with it. I think about it in relation to my previous experiences, other information and knowledge. I ask questions, I relate, I assimilate, I adapt, I question. तो शिक्षा में हमेशा ये एक टीचर के लिए, योगेश अब यहाँ 15 साल से पढ़ा रहे हैं, मैडम 15 साल से पढ़ा रही हैं, ये सेम कोर्स पढ़ा रही हैं, 4 आर्टिकल नहीं भी पढ़ के आते होंगे, लेकिन आप में को जो रीडिंग पढ़ा रहे हैं वो हो सकता है उसमें से आधी रीडिंग्स आपके लिए पहली बार है, इनके लिए 25वीं बार है। तो क्या फर्क है? When you are engaging, then the teacher's role, the purpose of education is also to open a whole new set of questions, vistas, experiences and reflections, perspectives. So in that sense, we need to first make a distinction between what is the purpose of education. Is it imparting information or is it developing capacities to create knowledge, produce knowledge and not just be consumers of information and knowledge given by others. Historically in India, textbooks and even for that matter even university teaching has been only about transference of information, where we are blank slates on which somebody else will write, as if, but we are not, number one. Number two, the question you are asking that, yes, these things have changed over time. Okay? But when you are talking, your question is also a product of your age issue, because you are a product of globalization. I guess your age will be between 25 to 30, not more than that. And 1991 is LPG. तो आप लोगों ने इंटरनेट देखा है और आप लोग जिस तरह से दोनों अंगूठों से मोबाइल चलाते हैं, मेरा तो अभी भी एक उंगली से चलता है, ठीक है, उसके चलते आपके पास जो डिफरेंट सोर्सेज हैं वो बहुत अलग है। इसलिए जो टेक्स्ट बुक से आपके पास आ रहा है, अब जैसे archive.org है, कितने ही डॉक्यूमेंट मिल रहे हैं, मैंने जिंदगी इधर से उधर धक्के खाते हुए निकाल दी। अब at a click of a mouse you are able to download the 1882 Hunter Commission report और provincial report भी आपको archive.org पे मिल जाती है। तो उससे फर्क पड़ा है, लेकिन एक चीज़ हमें अभी भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए, मैं टेक्स्ट बुक को जस्टिफाई करते हुए नहीं कह रहा हूँ, माई थिंग इज दैट we still need to develop frames to sift even what to select and how to engage with it. That remains constant irrespective of the sources that we have. क्योंकि जब पहली बार भारत में रेडियो आया होगा तो लोगों के पास पूरा एक नया सोर्स खुला होगा, कम्युनिटी रेडियो की बात आई होगी। जब पहली बार टीवी आया होगा, दूरदर्शन के कृषि दर्शन से लेके बाकी कार्यक्रम, आप अपनी माँ से जाके पूछें कि क्या वो 1 बजे महिलाओं की बातचीत विविध भारती पे सुना करती थी, प्लीज पूछ के बताइएगा। तो उनके लिए क्या सोर्सेस थे? फिल्म जब आई होंगी तो वो एक पूरा नया एक्सपीरियंस, लेकिन उससे पहले की भी जनरेशन है और किसके पास वो एक्सेस है। शायद आपको पता होगा कि फिल्में किस तरह से डब्बों से पहुंचती थी गाँवों में और कहाँ दिखाई जाती थी। सो दैट्स वन थिंग वी नीड टू डेफिनेटली, आई विल फर्दर वर्क एंड थिंक अबाउट इट एंड दैट्स। Then your question about epistemology is also very significant, because from Gadamer to Foucault, then these are also how do you look at questions of knowledge, power, transaction. Okay? So these have also affected the textbooks, but depending on whether the authors themselves are following that perspective. Okay? So if nation alone is not the central focus, rather the micro is, as in subaltern studies and post-structural, is not the 10th photocopy of the macro. Rather, micro itself has its own history and other things. तो उसके चलते अब जाके आप इन टेक्स्ट बुक्स को देखिए, आपको पोस्ट-स्ट्रक्चरल इन्फ्लुएंसेस कई चैप्टर्स में नजर आएंगे, स्पेशली इन सोशल साइंसेस। बट नाउ द न्यू टेक्स्ट बुक्स, फूको अभी भी है, उन टेक्स्ट बुक्स में आपको फूको दिख रहा है या कोई और दिख रहा है, वो भी देखिए। सो जस्ट बिकॉज, क्योंकि एक ही समय काल में एक से ज़्यादा पर्सपेक्टिव्स और आइडियोलॉजीज समाज में हैं, तो उनकी अलग अलग छटाएं किस किस रूप में हमें दिखती हैं, वो अपने आप में दिखने लगा।
No more questions.
Yeah, I think everybody will be exhausted.
Okay.
It's more than 2 hours.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ma'am, where are you, Dhara? Sorry, I have never met you.
I am based in Vadodara, Gujarat,
Okay.
and this is Central University of Gujarat.
Okay.
Yeah, I teach English over here, but my area of interest is colonial studies. That was the subject on which I worked for my PhD.
Okay. I look for you. Yeah, yes, please continue. Sorry.
No, it's just that I'm recently, like now, I've channelized my interest more into colonial education policies and textbook studies.
Oh, I
Yes.
definitely get you.
Nice.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So I think we have come to the end of the discussion with this, and I really thank Manish and also the audience, both online and here offline. And I think because of the paucity of
No,
time
yes.
and it's a very dense subject, I have realized that there's a lot to talk about, and I'm sure in future we will have more opportunities to interact and also engage with each other. And a lot of things have been talked about. We have a lot of things to take back and go back to look at it. And finally, thank you everybody. Thank you Manish, and this close the
Thank you.
session.
You too.
Thank you.